I'm Professor Rekha Sapra from the Department of Human Development and Family Empowerment, and I specialize in child development and child psychology. At the moment, I am the officiating principal of Bharati College. So welcome to this platform. When we talk of developmentally appropriate practices for early childhood education and early childhood years, then we have to be very, very sure about what we know about the child and how our understanding of the child development and learning can be used for this purpose. And for every child, we need to have a different sort of child-centered approach we need to take up, so that we know that what is known about the strength, interest, need of each individual child in the group. And we also need to be aware of the social, cultural context in which the child is living, because the child's personality, the domains of its development, all are dependent to a very large extent on the cultural background, the language, ethnic background, the religious background, and many other contexts in which a child is living, because the cultural contexts are very deep rooted in the child's domains of development. When we talk of principles of development, or then domains of children's development are different. There are physical, social, emotional, cognitive. All these developments are closely related. So here I would like to elaborate that when we are talking of physical development, social, emotional, cognitive or language development, we cannot study a single domain separately, because the interrelatedness of all these domains cannot be understood, or the interrelatedness of these domains is very important for us to take into account how they are going to contribute to the child's development, to the personality of the child development, and how the child is going to acquire these skills. The physical development, we can contribute. The physical development of the child means the motor development of the child, which can be of large muscles or fine motor or gross motor development. When we talk of gross motor development, we mean that when the child has the neural control over the muscles of the body, which are useful or used while walking, sitting, running, standing, all these muscles are the gross motor, come under the domains of gross motor development in the physical aspects of development. When we talk of fine motor development, this means how the fine muscles of the hands, eyes are being in coordination so that a single activity is being performed. When a child is focusing on cutting, pasting or writing, all these activities require a lot of concentration, focusing, coordination between the eye hands, small muscles, the eye hand coordination. All these are possible by fine motor development only. So, for example, for social development, we can talk of how the child is learning the social skills and how a child is acquiring the skills which can be used for the learning the social values, the social cultural values. All these come under the domain of social development. In early years, it's very important for us to interact with the children in a way which is socially acceptable behavior, so that the child learns how to behave in different settings and also how to interact with the peers, the other friends and others in the family, because the social development has been found at the backbone of each and every development during the later years of life. And the emotional development, the child experiences many emotions, the emotions of love, security, and understanding, jealousy. The positive and negative, both the emotions need to be handled in a mature manner, so the child knows how to express her emotions in a socially appropriate manner. And on the whole, the social as well as the emotional domains of development constitute a very important aspect of development, because the entire learning process, whether it is learning in the school, adjustment in the school, and other areas of development in later years of life, they are all dependent on the social and emotional skills and the competencies that the child acquires during the early years of life. The cognitive or the intellectual development is the most important aspect of development. Here the child is learning how to understand the environment, and knowledge is all about construction, because the child interacts with the environment, and during this interaction the child is able to form a reality for herself, which becomes the foundation for later development. And all these developments are very, very closely related. The language is dependent on what the child is hearing, how the child is hearing, the listening abilities, the ability to speak, to understand the words, to understand and comprehend the words. All this form the activities for language development. And when a child enters a nursery school, when a child enters a care center or any other center where the child is interacting with different adults and children in the environment, the child is exposed to language and also exposed to many other different parts which the child is listening to. And the activities being provided in the nursery setting or in any Anganwadi or Balwadi, these activities are focused to enhance the abilities of the children, so as they are being prepared for early education, formal school learning, to adjust and get along with their peers and friends, and also at large they understand the society, the community, and they are understanding how to interact with different aspects of the society, the school, the home, and other caregivers in the neighborhood, which form an important aspect of any child's environment. The development never takes place in a haphazard manner. It occurs in a very orderly sequence, on which the later abilities and skills develop, and the knowledge is built on already acquired skills and components of knowledge. The development proceeds at very different rates and can vary from child to child, and even different domains of developments can be developing differently for each child. Like there are some children who might learn to talk before they learn to walk, or there might be some children in whom the motor development is advanced compared to their language development. And in many of the developmental domains, there has been found a gender difference also, where the girls and boys do show a difference in their different domain development, but then ultimately all the children do develop, but then it can vary from one child to another child. The early experiences have both cumulative and delayed effects on individual children's development. Optimal periods exist for certain types of development and learning. When we say optimal period, that means these are those periods or these are those times when, with minimum amount of stimulation or minimum amount of inputs, the children can acquire a very difficult task very easily. For example, the age when the child is in the early years, that is 4 to 6 years, that is the critical age when the child is learning language and the child is learning to write and read. So if a child is exposed to different stimuli, exposed to different learning material, learning environments during these times, the child develops at a very fast rate. And the very fact that the plasticity of brain is maximum during early years, this makes this period all the more important. So we have to focus on the optimal period of development for all the domains of development, so that with minimum amount of inputs, stimulation, we can get the maximum output and benefits in terms of child's development. The development proceeds in predictable direction towards greater complexity, organization, and internalization. The development is happening in two orders. It can either be from head to toe or from center outwards. So these are the cephalocaudal and center to axis development. Like when a child, in the early years, the child is able to develop the child develops the head control, then the neck control. Similarly, the upper parts of the body are controlled before we can have control over the lower limbs and the lower parts of the body. So this is the direction. Similarly, the internal organs are the first ones to gain in terms of direction to be controlled by the body. Then comes the shoulder, our arms and tips of the hands, palms. In this order, this is the order of development which is predictable in humans. The rate and pace might vary, but otherwise the development proceeds in this order, in this manner, which is very much predictable. Development and learning occurs in and can be influenced by multiple social and cultural contexts. Here I would like to add that there are certain practices in certain cultures which might enhance the language development of children, or which might also reduce the child's abilities at learning certain things. So the cultural practices, social norms, all these do impact the learning and development of the children. But development by and large is impacted by the nature. The nurture part or the learning part can impact our skills which are dependent on the learning or which are dependent on the environment. Children are always active learners and drawing on direct physical social experiences as well as culturally transmitted knowledge to construct their own understandings of the world around them. So when anyone gives any instructions, it is never in the vacuum, because the child is an active learner and the experiences that a child is going through, the social milieu of the child, the physical environment of the child, the experiences of the child in his or her culturally constituted home environments and other environments do play an active part in construction of their own knowledge and understanding. And we can never give any knowledge to the child in a ready-made order. It is always constructed by the child depending on his or her own experiences. Then play is very, very important part of any learning, and all the learning in the early years is dependent or is to be imparted through play. Whether it is about language learning, it is about cognitive learning or the social emotional learning, any sort of learning is to be given through play, because play is one component, one thing that any child enjoys it, and it has to be spontaneous. So it becomes a very important vehicle for children's social, emotional, cognitive as well as reflections of their own development. The entire concept of early childhood education is based on play as the non-formal way of learning for the children. The early education is never about formal settings, it is about learning in a non-formal environment where the children are learning through play activities and also learning through different activities like poems, stories and other interactions which happen in any nursery or in any preschool center. The development takes place when the children have opportunities to practice new acquired skills as well as when they experience a challenge just beyond their level of present mastery. This is something very, very important that we all need to understand. We all have our levels of learning. So the potential that we acquire during any learning session can always be enhanced based on our environments and the sort of training interactions we receive from the adults teachers and others in the environment. So the learning that happens on our own and the learning which can happen in the presence of adults or other peers who are more experienced, this zone can always be increased. This zone is called the zone of proximal development. So if we want to enhance the learning of any child, any individual, this zone of proximal development needs to be enlarged, needs to be enhanced, so that the maximum optimum level of development can be acquired by the child. The children can have different modes of knowing and learning and different ways of representing what they know, because one child might experience or express his knowledge through the use of words. Similarly, the other child might use drawing as a medium. Somebody else might use it as in the way of telling a story. So how a child is making us know about what they know or represent their own reality can vary. But the child needs to express the self in whatever way the child chooses. Children develop and learn best in the context of a community where they are safe and valued. Their physical needs are met and they feel psychologically secure. So this is something very, very important. How do we make a child feel psychologically secure? For making the child feel physically secure, we know that the child may be given the understanding that there are parents, there are teachers, there are friends who might be there, who are there with them in case there is any problem or exigency. And also the child knows since the childhood, since the birth, that as and when the child cries, as and when the child is in need, there is some caregiver, most of the times the mother, who comes and takes care of the child. But psychologically security, how do we prove that to the child? So when we listen to the child, when we value what the child is saying, and when we try to understand the perspective of the child, and when the mother, parents and other caregivers, other members in the family pay attention to what the child is saying or doing, this gives a psychological security, because the child feels that he is being valued. And when we play with the child, when we listen to the stories of the child, when we are giving time, attention, and just not being there, but being there and giving the attention to the child, this is the most important way of showing to the child that we care for the child, we value the child. And when the child is being heard, when the child is given certain responsibilities at home, like if the mother when mother is cooking, she might ask the child to do some menial jobs, like maybe to do something which a child is able to do in the kitchen, so that the child feels that he or she is contributing positively to the family, giving the inputs. And whatever the child is making, doing drawings, one needs to give appreciation. We might not like whatever the child has drawn or done anything, or maybe it is a repetition of what the child has been doing earlier, but the child still needs that attention and reinforcement. This reinforcement is very important for the child, as this is the point of time where the child realizes that as he or she is approaching the society or giving the viewpoints in any other environment, maybe the school environment, the child feels confident, the child feels free and feels confident to express the opinion, and such children become more responsible as in school and are more competitive, and they are very good at trying out new things in the environment, because this is how they have been developed, that when they try out new things, they have been appreciated for their efforts, because it is not only the end product which is more important in any setting, it is the process which needs to be appreciated, which needs to be reinforced, which needs to be cultivated, so as to give a self-confidence, because this is the time the child is developing his identity. The identity, self of the child is being made, and the child is listening to the what the parents are saying, yes, no, all these sounds, all these things of the parents become the internal voice for the child, which becomes very important and is bound to create the confidence in the child and an internal realization that the child is secure psychologically, which we all have to emphasize, promote, because a safe home environment is the foundation for a safe and secure, psychologically secure child, which can develop into a proper mental well-being of the child. Thank you very much.